If I work on something, I really feel I should take responsibility for what the possible outcome of what I put into the world might be. The process of making something, you learn a lot from doing it. The act of doing it is meaningful in and of itself. Hello, my name is Mitch, and I hack.
Hello and welcome to Reality's podcast, bringing you personal missions and unique experiences, all in the effort to better understand our world and each other. I'm your host, Mark Fonseca Rendeiro. Glad to have you with me again. Mitch Altman is a hacker. He's a maker. Basically, he's a teacher whose work and lessons that he teaches have taken him to almost every corner of the world and back again, and then back again. He never stops, but he happened to come to my house recently. He's the co-founder of San Francisco's renowned hackerspace, NoiseBridge. He's also been someone that for more than 10 years has been teaching and sharing knowledge and getting so much from it, to the point that now governments, conferences all over the world want him to come and share some of that magic in their part of the world. He's got this inner wisdom that I'm very pleased to be able to share with you. I'm also pleased, on a personal note, to be able to sit down with such a longtime friend of mine and someone who, together, we've seen changes in a community, the hacker community, perhaps the tech community, so many different interlocking communities in this world. I think it's a great voice to hear from. I think you're going to enjoy it. Get ready to travel, not only in time, but I think also in your heart. Here he is, Mitch Altman, at my dinner table in Amsterdam. Let's go. So one of the ideas here, Mitch, is that this can be, well, this is for my new podcast, right? Reality's podcast, which is really just a renaming of an idea that I've always followed, that I want to talk to people about what they're doing, what they love to do, especially, and maybe share a bit about that process. And I'm also a fan of learning about how people see the world, right? And what they see, especially, and that kind of stuff. So that's the sort of inspiration, which still keeps it quite wide open in terms of topics. But something I try and keep in mind is you and I have had lots of podcasts over the years, and I treasure each one. And in many ways, people listening might have listened to some of those, but I want to make sure that people that are new and trying it out for the first time could get into it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I want to talk a little bit about the past. And I was thinking about, what about the past? Because here we are at my kitchen table in Amsterdam. And so you and I have had a day or so to catch up and talk, and more than catch up, talk about all kinds of things. And we get to learn about stories from good times, bad times in the past and far past, childhood. Yeah. So one of the so first of all, we should introduce you, or how do you introduce yourself these days? Mitch Altman is here, and he does so many things in this world, and he has for a while now. One place we can start, maybe, and then I'll leave it to you, is you and I met in 2006, I want to say.
2006 at Hope number 6.
Hope number 6. No. It was, I've realized recently that I don't think I was at Hope 6.
Really?
I'm not positive.
I remember you there.
Might have been one of my first. No, earlier. I don't know.
My first was 23 in 2006.
That sounds like it.
And
that's the one.
Maybe we
have to go over themes. What was the theme? It would have been there.
I don't think you can read it anymore, but here it is.
So Mitch has on his arm lanyards from every Congress.
Yeah, plus a bunch more.
Camps. Maker Faire. I see a Maker Faire on his arm.
Maker Faires. Most of them are buried.
I'm going to snap a photo of the arm. But, I mean, if we go back to Mitch Altman even 11, 12 years ago, maybe we should go even a little further, but who were you? Because I want to talk about who you are now. I mean, you're still Mitch, but what was? Yeah, could you talk a little bit about who you were before you first went to a hacker
conference?
Of
yeah, hacker conference really did change my life in so many ways for so many positive things. Before 2003, I was living a life that I liked and thought was really cool, and which is amazingly better than the first half of my life, where I lived my life in total horrible depression and feeling full of self-loathing, and all these insecurities were at the fore. And so for like about 15 years, I was making enough money being a consultant for small companies doing electronic stuff, usually with microcontrollers, computer chips. And there weren't all that many people back then who could do that kind of stuff. So I was paid really well, and I didn't have to work all that much to make enough money to live for a year. So I didn't work all that much, and then I would do other cool things. But I noticed that I'd have to recover from all of the work I did for these companies, because it was really intense to just put off all of human life in favor of just pure rationality, which you have to do to be a geek work kind of person. And we're all kind of used to that, whatever your geeky realm might be. But so I always had this notion that I really didn't want to work for a living.
So even back then, yeah.
Oh yeah, I was a little kid actually. Because my father would talk about, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, oh, grow up. Wow, that sounds horrible. So that means you stop growing if you're grown up. Right. That doesn't sound good. I want to keep growing until I'm dead. And, just in so many other ways, if not physically. So, but, the idea of having a job and going there every day after day, week after week, month after month. Even as a little kid, that just sounded horrible. But of course, I was depressed, so everything sounded horrible. Yeah. But that's particularly was not me. Yeah. And there were so many things about what most people did that just wasn't me. And, whatever. I wanted to be normal back then, whatever that meant. But now I'm just so glad that I'm not acting normal, because I can act like me, whatever that is. And encourage other people to, not just act, but be them as best as they can be. And I kind of like playing provocative poking role, and I can poke people and get people maybe to think about making choices that might be better for themselves. And because nothing's in a vacuum, so I try to put that in, and I see that as my role now. But that really did start from in many ways from going to hacker spaces, and for the first time talking for large numbers of people live who I relate to. And being an introverted geek, talking in front of a live audience is terrifying. And it still is. I'm used to that terror now. Yeah. But I actually enjoy the experience, not the terror, but the experience. And I can say whatever I want, and people just seem to listen. And if I'm talking about whatever, I can put in a bit of life philosophy, and people seem to respond well, so I keep doing it. If people stop responding well, maybe I'll get hurt. I don't know. But doing, just to finish that thought, then, I actually purposely quit working. Yeah.
Even though you didn't, the work that you were doing at that time, you had a company.
I had a company to do the consulting work. It was really a DBA, doing business as. It wasn't an official corporation or anything. Okay. But Cornfield Electronics, named after the corn that I was surrounded by in University of Illinois. Yeah. Surrounded by corn. And I thought, the irony of Cornfield Electronics just sort of suited me. So Cornfield Electronics did consulting work. It was just me for small companies. And I got enough money to live the rest of the year in like 3 weeks to 3 months. And it was kind of cool, but it was not really what I wanted to do. And I just knew that there could be more out of life if I could really follow what I knew as a little kid, that I wanted somehow to make a living doing what I love, to get enough resources doing what I love, to keep doing what I love, whatever that would mean.
Right. I was going to ask, at that point, like when you stopped working or tried to stop working, what was it that you loved I can clearly see what you didn't love, but what was that you loved back then?
Well, I didn't know how I would make money doing what I loved, but I did know a lot of things that I loved by then. I did lots and lots of different volunteer work that I loved. So I was on a suicide hotline and emotional support for people with HIV. I would collect computers, old ones. In San Francisco, when people don't want something, they put it on the curb. It's like a huge free box, San Francisco. And people, they know someone will collect it. And so I collected computers and computer parts and put them together and made really good computers and gave them away to low-income people for free and to not rich nonprofits. And so that grew pretty big, and I really loved doing that and helping small nonprofits with their computer stuff. And I also did stuff behind, the tech work for theater, which I like, for, light and sound and stuff like that, volunteering at film festivals and, on and on, just doing stuff that was stuff I was interested in that also helped other people through these nonprofits or on my own.
Yeah. It's interesting that so much of what you just listed wasn't just tech for the sake of tech. It was tech and humans and tech and organizations and people in need. So I can see where that was you connecting that, something that you're good at doing, and then who you could help with that.
Yeah, use my skills for something, not just for making another gadget or doodah to put into the world. Because I'd been working in electronics for pretty much all my life. And, what good does this electronics do? There's a lot of stuff that's cool. I mean, here we are in a kitchen table with a bunch of microphones and some electronics for audio and a computer. We can get this out into the world. It's cool. But working on those kind of things I might do for myself, but it's not really what I want to do for a living. It's not what excites me. And, and I didn't really know what it might be that would excite me using my skills in electronics as far as making a living. And I think about it a lot. I have these skills. I'm really good at it. I've been doing it a lot. I put in way more than my 10,000 hours, so I was really good at it, and I enjoyed it. But everywhere I ever worked, the military would come in and want to take what we've been working on, and that was 100% of the time. And the people I worked for always said yes, and I would quit. Yeah. Because I didn't want to help the military, because I see it as one of the worst forces available on our planet at the moment.
Now, people who are listening who may not know you but are getting to know you now, when you say that, they may not understand, right? So could you just give some examples? Because I could have understood, I think, more people, like 1 time, 2 times the military, but you're saying every time. Some examples.
Yeah, every time. The first job in electronics that I had was working for a small company that made computer games on Apple II computers. And Apple IIs were kind of new back then. This is a long time ago. I'm going to be 60 years old in December, so I've been around for a while on our weird and beautiful little planet. So even back then, working on a computer game, it was really fun. By the end of the summer, the U.S. military came in and said, "Oh, cool game. Can you just modify it and we'll make a killer helicopter training simulator?" Yeah. And the people I worked for said, "Sure, that'd be great. We'll make lots of money." And I was just horrified. It's like, really? You're okay with that? And they were just like, well, it makes lots of money. Why wouldn't it be okay? If we don't do it, someone else will, which is...
the classic.
Everyone said that in the electrical engineering department, too, and when they went off to the military to make bombs or whatever they made. So
even back then, you had no doubts about the fact that you weren't. How did you handle that when
I quit?
Yeah,
they weren't about to change, and it was their choice. So my only choice was to continue helping or to quit. So I quit. So yeah, and I helped develop virtual reality. In fact, I worked with the people where we created that phrase. And worked on all the technology that now is super, for a few $100s, you can do what we were doing back then for $250,000, and it's way better now. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about virtual reality. It's really cool, but it's also really powerful, and it's a powerful medium and media in our lives now. the bar is lowered. So, here we are being able to produce content for media that a lot of people might benefit from. And we're not doing this to manipulate people or to sell or manipulate people into buying things they don't want or need or whatever. Hopefully give people an opportunity to think about things they might not have thought about in a particular way. And maybe it'll enhance their life, we can hope.
I love that.
Yeah. But most media, the compelling media out there, the mainstream, is there to make a profit or to somehow gain power, one of those two. And they have the time, the energy, the money, the resources to make amazingly compelling content. And it's not there for anyone's benefit. Not even the people who are making the profit. I mean, it's just profit. It's not their benefit. It's not making their life better. It's just bigger numbers in a bank account. And people get more power. That's not even their benefit. That's just people being able to have more power to force people to do what they want. Is that really helping anybody? I don't think it's even helping the person who's doing the forcing. Yeah. So, VR, virtual reality, that's powerful media. It's all encompassing. And so the power to manipulate people to do whatever, selling anything from dish soap to politicians, is immense.
Yes.
And I'm not happy about that. But when the U.S. military tricked us into selling one to the University of Central Florida, a system that I spent 3 months of my life working on, because back then it was I was the one making the systems, and it really took 3 months to make each one. And with a whole group of people, with me telling people what to do. And it was fun. It was really, really fun. But the University of Central Florida got it, and it turned out that it was through them that the U.S. military got it, and they used it. And we found out because on Usenet, this is before the World Wide Web.
Some people know that.
They were bragging about they tricked us into getting it to them, and they were using it as a World War III training simulator.
Did this cause you to, every time you worked on something after that, to take a second and third look at everything and go, I know what I'd like to do, but wait a minute, what could somebody use this for? Did you start to sort of be cynical about what you would work on in terms of what other people would do with it?
Not so much cynical, but looking at things as a whole. So if I work on something, I really feel I should take responsibility for what the possible outcome of what I put into the world might be. And there's no way to know. Yeah. And I can have an intent. I mean, our intent with doing virtual reality wasn't to have World War III, but other people would take the tools that we made, and that's what technology is, just tools. Right. Some of them very powerful, and do whatever they want to do with them. And when we have an economy which is based on military, because it's so profitable, people are paid well to look at all the new technologies to see how they can be used for destruction, spying, killing, maiming, whatever. And I know I don't want to help do that, but there's no way to not do that to at least some extent. But I think it's really important for all of us to think about that. And I've been thinking about this myself for a long time. I can't control what happens when I put something out in the world, but I can, to the best of my ability, not work on things that I think will be used for more harm than good. Yeah. And again, no way to know, and everyone has to make these decisions for themselves. Yeah. But it's important to think about so we can make those decisions.
Yeah. Do you feel that, because you see some of the stuff today, you and I had a conversation about banks, and I was just telling you about ethical banking, at least here in the Netherlands, right? And I think a lot of people know there may be ethical banks, but what's the situation? It's tricky, right? And the other layer that makes it trickier is that everyone wants to say nowadays, whether you're a bank or a game company or whatever you are, that you are being more ethical than you used to be, right? We live in this era of, you can call it greenwashing or putting green tint on things, because on the one hand, there's an impression possibly that people care more than they used to, or more people care than used to. And on the other hand, of course, there's also the desire by companies to, at the very least, I mean, the absolute least, to at least look like they care. And in some cases, there's a desire by companies to actually be
Well, there's not a desire by companies, but there's a desire by individuals who play roles in the company.
Sure.
And if they're in a position where they can actually make the trade-off of doing something right or doing something for maximizing profit, if they're in a position where they can actually make the decision to do something right and not get fired, then maybe they can do that.
Do you think we live in an era where that's happening more than it used to, or?
It's hard to say. There's outlets now. Like in the US, there's a fairly new category of corporation called a B Corp, where they can make profit. It's a for-profit corporation that's primary mission is doing good in the world, as opposed to regular for-profit corporations. The primary goal is to maximize dividends for the shareholders. And the shareholders, if it's publicly traded, are always going to vote, pretty much always going to vote for maximizing profit rather than doing something that's ethical or worthwhile. So, maximizing profits regardless of consequence. And, look at the world we live in. I think a huge part of that is because of that. The U.S. military doesn't exist to defend the nation of the United States of America. It exists to maximize profits for huge military contractors. And boy, are they making lots of money. And look at the consequences of that. So, I know I don't want to help that. I pay taxes. The consequences of not paying taxes are pretty difficult, and I'm not ready to do that. So I pay taxes, so I'm playing a role in helping make the world a worse place.
Right.
But what am I willing to do and not willing to do? And again, I think it's important for everyone to think about that and make their own choices consciously as much as we can.
Yeah. I feel like in different projects, and I know you've run into this and I have run into this, if you do take a stand on in certain moments, certain issues, someone will come up to you, usually the critic, the cynic, and say, well, you do that, but you pay taxes, or you do X and Y that do support the government. And this becomes a sort of justification by some people not to do anything because you can't be sustainable, or it seems like that's another powerful voice in our world that says, since you can't do it 100%, don't do it.
Yeah, and that's silly, we all do all sorts of things, and there's no such thing as being perfect. What would that even mean? Who defines perfect? And what we think is really cool now, after a little bit of experience, we see that it's different. Yeah. So we have to all, just keep on the ball and reevaluate these things as we go along to rationalize why it's really important to make more money rather than to do something ethical or right or something that's worthwhile is just that. It's a rationalization, a way of convincing yourself that what you have been doing is okay because it's scary or hard or whatever reason difficult to make new choices. And people are, for the most part, all of us are averse to change. But change is something that's always happening. It's
whether you want it or not. Yeah.
The constant of the universe is change. Yeah. So and we have to be able to be agile enough to go along with that. But again, keeping tabs on that to not use that as a rational to catch ourselves when we feel we might be rationalizing. Because if you have a company which can sell to the U.S. military and you can rationalize yourself saying, oh, but it's actually helping people, it's helping the individuals or jobs or whatever, there's pluses and minuses to everything, and how do we balance that off? And each person has to do that for themselves, I think. And it helps to have a community where you can bounce ideas off of, and not just your own Facebook bubble where you just get feedback of the exact same wording of the exact same things day after day, but actual real community and real life with living, breathing human beings who can interact with each other. And humans are great random elements, so they throw monkey wrenches at everything, and you have to hopefully respond rather than react, and learn and grow and become better people as a result.
Yeah. You said something recently, and you've said it before, I think, but you were talking about money, and I think it's a topic that one word we could use is fascinates you, not always, often not in a good way, but and how money, well, I'll say the word works but I won't exaggerate the working part, how it comes into existence and then where it goes and why. And you said, money's a resource. You were talking about this, but how it's treated somewhat differently as a resource. I thought this was really interesting and I think it's something that we know, we have resources in our world. They're, I guess, limited. Some are more important than others, but money is in its own category.
Yeah, money doesn't do any good at all in and of itself. It's either an exchange medium or a way of saving some resources for later when you need them. It fulfills those two roles. And it can do that really well, but it's highly addictive, as it turns out. So money isn't in and of itself evil, but, the root of all evil, like some of these people say, I don't see it that way. It's just a resource, but any resource that you hoard and that you become addicted to drives people to do all sorts of amazingly bizarre and weird and often terrible things that they wouldn't do otherwise. Water, we need water. We absolutely need water or we die. Yeah. But there aren't all that many people, certainly not in the West or in China and maybe in way underdeveloped places where it's hard to get clean water. It's different. But in the West, no one says, oh, I've got water, but I might not have enough. Maybe I should hoard it. I need more. And then they get more. And no matter how much they have, they still think they should get more because more is better. They don't do that, but they do that with money. But money is only good for buying other things that might be useful. Of course, we get addicted to actually buying things as retail therapy. And, you can also save and then become a hoarder. And, there's all these real, I see it as maladies that money seems to engender in people. And, why? But for whatever reasons, it's extremely addictive and people become way dysfunctional around it. Yeah. We all have, depending on our upbringing, have a more or less dysfunctional relationship with this one particular resource. Yeah. And so this is something that is really interesting to think about. We were talking about this, and I came across the concept. Well, I started becoming fascinated with how money works because I started learning about Bitcoin just from being at all these hacker spaces around the world. Yeah. And for people who don't know, I was a co-founder of NoiseBridge, one of the early hacker spaces in the US. And back then there were, in 2007, not all that long, but 2007, there were like 40 hacker spaces in the world. And now there's like thousands. We don't even know how many because China's starting them like crazy, although you have to put them in quotes, but that's another story. So from going to hacker spaces, people are enamored with Bitcoin, especially at the beginning. And after hearing how Bitcoin works from all these different people, I actually started accepting them for kits because I teach people electronics and I have materials. People can buy kits and learn how to make them. And it's fun. I love doing that. And and Bitcoin became kind of fascinating to me, too. I'm not like a Bitcoin nut going around promoting it. I know plenty of people who do. It's really cool. But I have a bunch of Bitcoin. And to me, they're worth like total $100 because that's the amount of kits that I traded for them. And now they're worth, I don't know how many, 10,000 or something. It's crazy. Yeah. But at some point, I realized I knew more about Bitcoin than about dollars, which is the currency in the country I come from. And what are these dollar things? I mean, they're pieces of paper with 1 in the corners, or 10, or 5, or 50. And but what are they? Where do they come from? Where do they go? How do they come about? What's the story? And the more I found out, the more it was like, wow, this is really weird stuff. And the Federal Reserve, central banks, and it's similar with Europe and other countries. They put it into existence as debt. When money comes into existence, it's actually debt. And from the Federal Reserve, they say, we need $10 billion in the economy. So the Treasury prints up or puts into existence $10 billion. And then they owe that to the Federal Reserve with interest. Yeah. And that's debt. And it doesn't have to be that way because there's been mediums of exchange that weren't created from debt with interest. And there's lots and lots of fascinating stories throughout history that you can read about if you're interested in this. And yet now people don't see money as for what it is. It's this thing that we need and want more of. And no matter how much we have, we want more. And no matter how much more we have, we still want more. And there's never enough.
I believe that it's seen as, well, many things. We can make a list, but security, as peace of mind, if you have it, of course. And so families, lovely families, raise children with the hope that they will have it. Not just that, of course, some families will talk about happiness and other concepts that are going to be useful in your life, but there is always this idea, and I think you've run into it all the time because you travel all over the world, and so many families are concerned that not just, never mind themselves, but for their future generations that will have money, right? So the addiction is, or the need, or the perceived value is huge. I mean, it's, and then you have traditions in this world involving who gets money when someone gets married or when someone dies, and how much do you need to do these things, and
and how much do you throw around to show that you're the big dick in the world, and someone people should look up to, high status, and but again, it's not about the money. People focus on the money, but it's not about the money. You were talking about all these different things that somehow money becomes the focus of instead of those things. So security, there's no such thing as security, but we can make things hopefully more secure for ourselves in some possible future. But then again, in so many traditions, we focus on the future and we extrapolate from the past, and we're not focusing on our lives here and now. Yeah. The future, the past had pluses and minuses, good things, bad things, and we extrapolate from that into the future, and we go, well, what if things are bad? We don't go, wow, what if things are wonderful? Right.
No, you plan always for the worst.
It seems like it. And so we have more money, but how much is enough? I mean, someone I used to work with said, enough. They've actually thought of enough, which is kind of unique. Most people don't. His definition of enough was, okay, so $10 million seems like enough, okay? But not $10 million in the bank. $10 million in interest from whatever's in the bank.
Go in a different direction. Although, it is fascinating. So as you started to talk about, you, in the work that you've been doing over the past decade, you travel around the world. You get to give these workshops, not just workshops. You get to sort of watch people learn and help them along the way if they want it, right? Sometimes they don't even want it. They just keep going and you watch. But in that time, you can have all kinds of conversations and all kinds of observations. And I find it interesting. I didn't know until I think this visit that money as a topic was something you were really reading a lot about, and finance and that, money, currency and that sort of thing. A little story perhaps. Do you remember when Hope, for example, so the New York-based, until now, right, still New York-based, hacker conference that happens every 2 years at the Hotel Penn, as long as I've known about it. How did that happen?
How did I get involved with that?
Yeah. What was that, a phone call back then?
It was actually. Or it was an email actually from one of the people. So Hope, Hackers on Planet Earth conference happens every 2 years in New York City. It was about 2,000 people back then. Now it's 3,000 or so. And it sells out. The whole hacker scene is just become more and more popular. But in 2006, I was selling TV Be Gone, and that was an outgrowth of quitting my work and exploring and doing stuff that I thought I might really love. And what I loved was working on this one project I'd been thinking of for many, many years, which is to turn off TVs in public places, a keychain to turn off TVs in public places. And it turned out lots of people liked it, so I saw an opportunity and I made as many as I could afford, and they were an overnight hit, literally overnight. And I sold 20,000 in 3 weeks, and I sold 500,000 over the last 12 years and made a living from it. But back then, 2006, it'd been around for a little less than 2 years. And I got a call from one of the people who was part of 2600, the organization that puts on Hope conferences, amongst other things. And he was saying, wow, I really like these things. I'd like to get a box of them for gifts. And we just started talking on the phone to work out the details because I was new at all that and of selling things wholesale and whatnot. Yeah. I'm not a business person, but I had to become one. And we just clicked. And so he said, hey, I've got this conference coming up.
Yeah.
And would you like to come give a talk?
Oh, so it was a talk first. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I had a table, and I noticed there, and also at an event that happened just a little bit before in May, and the conference was in August 2006, Hope Conference, Maker Faire, which is the first Maker Faire. And Maker Faire is a huge event now of like over 100,000 people in San Francisco, and they've got smaller ones all over the world, and many of them aren't small at all. They're tens of thousands of people in many of them. And but the first one is supposed to be a whole bunch of people who make things and showing them off, but no one was actually making anything there. People were showing off things they made, and many of them were cool, but no one was making anything there. And same with Hope, no one was making anything. So for both of those, I thought, wow, I should start teaching things that I love, making things, which is electronics. So I could teach how to solder. Although I'm out of the United States, so I have to say solder.
Solder? Yes.
Yeah, solder. But solder, in Americanese, is the process of connecting parts together and making an electronic circuit that does something cool. Okay. So I made kits, bags of parts with a board that are easy for beginners to put together, and it works. And so I started teaching that at the next Maker Faire, at the next Hope. Yeah. And it really changed my life forever in that regard, because I found that I totally love doing that, and now this year I'm home less than 3 months total because I'm going around giving talks and workshops. It's been tons of fun.
I've often explained when I bring someone to a conference, and I know Mitch is going to be there. I do mention TV Be Gone and what it does, and sometimes people will say, even before they've seen it or met you, and they'll say like, "Oh, I want to get one." And but then I always explain like, no, well, actually, while you're here, rather than buy one, which you could do, and will still probably do, but you can make one, and you buy the parts and you make it. And it's always funny when somebody hears that idea, and then they get to your area, and there's table upon table upon table with soldering irons and all the pieces, and and you got parents with their kids and people who don't know each other talking to each other. And it's like, yeah, okay, there is a product, a final product. And if you want, you can buy the final product. But actually what's really going on here and what people are really here for is to build the product, enhance the product, right? Then they start making just different versions of it or putting it into different objects. That was a thing. So it's an amazing sort of evolution, and somehow I think for some people hard to understand at first or grasp, because we're so used to this like, oh, you're a person that makes things and then you sell them. I understand that. You have a web shop, right? Like there's a lot of, that's a common, but you're in this whole other category, which is you're busy helping people build the device, which you once upon a time created and people will buy.
Yeah, right. And I have made a living from it for the last 12 years. And it's open source. All the plans for everything you need to reproduce them exactly as I sell them are online for free. And it works great for me. And making a kit version of it helps a lot too. So I didn't do this by design, but it turns out that by giving workshops, and my most popular kit, I've got like 25, 30 different kits of, anything from TV Begone to blinky lights and sound makers and all sorts of fun things, things with brain waves and things that move and whatever. So, but TV Begone's the most popular still after all these years. And so if people buy my kit, then I get some money for that. I don't really make money from selling kits. I just do that because I love people, teaching people how to make things and encouraging people to try things they might not have thought they would have been able to do. And then they find they can, they have confidence. It's really fun. And that carries off into other aspects of their life. But but when someone just gets the plan online, plans online, they make it on their own, I don't get a cent from that, but they do go around turning TVs off, which is good. And they also tell everyone, hey, look what I made. Yeah. And it's called TV Begone. And then people are fascinated with that and they find out more about it that they might not have known about it. And then some percentage of those people will buy my thing. Yeah. And again, I didn't do that by intention, but when you're doing what you really love, the enthusiasm's quite contagious. And for people who like what you do, they catch that enthusiasm and they share it. And that's PR that you can't afford unless you're a huge corporation.
Yeah, can't recreate. Do you find that, we know that in this world, we've talked a little bit about it, consumerism and the need to buy more things and have more things. On the other hand, your experience in all different countries around the world is that people are actually interested in knowing how it works, building it from scratch. Is it a counter wave? The consumerists of the world, I'm just going to buy it, where can I get it? And no, wait, I want to know how this works. I want to know how to build it. Are you seeing a new generation coming up that's going to be different? And I'm not saying they're not going to use money or buy things. That part would perhaps be too difficult at this point, but that are not what we call just the pure consumerists who just go like, I'm just going to buy it.
That would be nice. There's nothing wrong with buying things. If it's something you think you really do want. So much of consumerist society is being manipulated into buying things we don't really want or need. And, we all have insecurities. Many people are afraid of examining them. And when we go around with insecurities that are unexamined, they just build up, and that will come out in some unhealthy way if we don't give it a healthy outlet. By having the ability to make things in a community that encourages people to do what they enjoy, they can find that, actually making something is fun and enjoyable, and you can find meaning in doing that, especially if it's in a community of people doing it together. We really need community in our lives, and we don't have enough of it. And just being in community can be meaningful. Making things can be meaningful, with the right context, making the things you think you might want or need or like. That's, there, especially in Asia, but in the West as well, why would I make something when I could just buy it for cheaper and it's better? And, and that's a valid question. But the point of making something isn't that it'll be cheap and good necessarily, but that the process of making something, you learn a lot from doing it. And the act of doing that is something, if it is indeed something you really enjoy, the act of doing it is meaningful in and of itself. And the thing is, actually something I wanted to touch on before when we were talking about money, people focus on the money, but it really is, what's the point of life? Life itself, People have been asking this question forever and it'll never be answered definitively. But, I think for me, it's to be as happy and healthy as I can be while I'm alive. But what does that mean? Those are abstract words too. Under the circumstances, if I have my legs amputated for whatever reason, that's a bummer, but, I can still be as happy and healthy as I can be under those circumstances. And, for me, being happy necessarily, I can't do that unless people around me are also enjoying their life and finding meaning in what they're doing. I'm not in a vacuum, so I need to be helping other people as best as I can. And for me, helping other people doesn't mean, here, you should do this. I don't know what's good for other people. I barely know what's good for me, but through my experiences, I see what feels better, what over the long term, all things considered, makes me feel like my life is meaningful, like my life is way worthwhile. I feel my life is way worthwhile. And we live on a planet where I think, unfortunately, that a vast majority do not believe that their lives are way worthwhile. You know, and these insecurities are, we carry them along, and we're looking externally to try to fix that. And it can't be fixed. These insecurities don't go away. They're part of us. And if we push them away, it will come out in an unhealthy way. But if we examine them, we see them for what they are, it might not be fun. It might be really horrible. But there's a lot of pain that we all carry. I know I do. But it's part of me. It'll never go away until I'm dead. But while I'm alive, I can accept that as part of me. And now I don't have to act out from that painful part to try to avoid it. I don't have to push it away. I don't have to do any of the addictive behaviors or substances that I used to do to try to push it away, like TV or money or buying things that I don't want or need, or being easily manipulated by these marketing techniques that are very sophisticated, repeated and repeated and repeated ad nauseum through all this media that we have in our lives, telling me that I should do this and everyone else is doing this, so I might as well go along with it. And what is it doing to enhance my life? Nothing. So, whereas I can use all of that energy that was just expended, even just explaining that, it takes a lot of energy. I can use all that energy to do something that might possibly enhance my life and lead towards making choices, the consequences of which will help me feel my life is way worth living. So, that's not easy, but it's way worthwhile.
It reminds me, and you've started to touch on this subject. You were one of the first people in my eyes, just in my eyes, I think many people, especially in Europe, who were going to the Hacker Congress in Germany, to bring in these sessions, so people can imagine at home. You've got 1 or 2 or 3 stages where people are presenting, and there's lots of people. And by the way, we say Hacker Congress, but keep in mind, this is 2016 and the years leading up to. That means it's not just people that are trying to be devious and antisocial. That exists too, but anybody is coming to hacker events. Obviously, geographically, there's a certain profile, but even that started to get challenged a bit over the years. So these are events where people come with all kinds of interests and topics. But certainly for the early years, as I understand it, it was often technical. But you were among the first people to be, at least on panels, on the topic of emotional well-being, on depression, in the community, which is such a large community. You know, we used to say the hacker community in, I don't know, in New York or in West Coast or in Germany. But now this bridge is, well, it's not even a bridge. It's just so many tentacles going all over the place. But one thing we've seen over and over again, a common feature, is this aspect of people who feel, well, they're depressed, they're in despair, and they feel extremely alone. Even if they're part of a community, it's not enough. And I'm curious, I mean, I think we can all understand why you were motivated to talk about this and to start some kind of a process or a tradition of making that part of what we talk about at conferences. But I also wonder, and you can talk about the thinking at the time, but have we improved? Do you see any signs of that we're better than we used to be at addressing this?
Yeah, we're definitely better. Community really is important in our lives, but it's not the cure for everything. Community doesn't fix anything in and of itself, but being in a functional community, people have much better ability for healing when people are encouraging and supporting each other. And one of the things that changed my life forever, going to my first hacker conference, was for the first time in my entire life feeling fantastic in a large group of people. Because as a little kid, being in a group of people meant probably I was going to get beaten up by bullies. And I was always terrified of people as a little kid. I was super, 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 I mean, you could call it shy, but it was like, you know, it was almost pathologically, just stayed away from people. And people wouldn't, you know, people who don't know me look at me in public and they might think that it's absurd to think that I'm an introvert, but I'm totally an introvert. An introvert gets their juice by one-on-one talks like we're having now, even if a lot of people are listening later from the recording, or being alone working on projects. I've learned through the years to live in an extroverted world, and it's great to be in groups, and we do need community even as extroverts. As introverts, we still need community. But here was thousands of people all in one place, all geeky, all introverts. And I didn't even have to have a moment's thought about how I'll be perceived as an introverted geek, because we're all introverted geeks with rare exception at this thing. So, and community is something that I've always focused on, even as a little kid, wanting to be part of the groups of people that I saw, probably erroneously, as being the happy people because they were all talking and doing cool things, and I was just all alone being depressed. So, you know, community, it's something I strived for. And then through the years, it's part of my process of learning to live a life that I found way worthwhile was being parts of communities, many that I helped form, many that just being a part of enhancing ones that others have formed. But here, I felt real community, basically my tribe, our tribe. And I also saw that there were a lot of people like me who have a long history of depression. And it wasn't so much talked about. And that was in 2011 at the Congress in Germany after a friend of mine had killed himself. And it was very difficult. I'd known people who'd killed themselves before, but I never knew anyone that I felt really close to that killed themselves. And it's like nothing else. It's strong, amazing, weird, terrible, wonderful, and all these different emotions floating around, including anger and rage at the person for doing such a horrible thing. And it doesn't feel good to be angry at someone who killed themselves. And so I get down on myself. And it's a mess. And so lightning talks at these congresses are really popular. They're, depending on who's organizing them, there's maybe like 40 or 50 talks, one right after another, and they're all like between 2 and 5 minutes. And after those were over, the person organizing them that year, Nick Farr, he suggested doing a panel on depression. And so I got together a few people that I know have stories and experience with depression, and we all told our stories, and I moderated it. And I started off telling some of my story, and it was really emotional, but it was really great. And even though it's about depression, which most people don't go, oh yeah, depression, let's go to that. It was really a fantastic response from the community. And, you know, if we're going to have community that really works, we have to be able to express all of who we are, even the parts we don't think we like, even the parts we know we hate. We have to be able to express all of who we are if we're going to have functional community. And there's so many people in our community that suffer from depression ongoing or have that can help others in going through what they're going through. Talking about it has helped immensely. And there have been Geeks and Depression meetups as a result, outgrowth of that panel at 28C3. And anyone interested, you can just search for Geeks and Depression panel, and you'll find the 28C3 recording of it.
I think it's amazing how, in a good way, things can evolve, including in the hacker community. Maybe once upon a time, people hadn't thought this far ahead or hadn't thought this far in terms of scope of the things that we would need that we could do even. And now it, even in terms of how we treat one another and not just being kind to each other. I think people always said be kind to one another, but now just being a little more aware of how you're treating each other has become something people are interested in doing. I mean, of course, some people complain like, oh, it's so much more difficult now. But I think by and large, people are into the idea of, wow, some of us never thought about that we could do something about depression, or people among our friends, our community that are having trouble and we're not paying attention or we're not noticing it. So I think it's amazing how the community grows and handles it. Yeah, I often wonder if there's not more that can be done and that kind of thing. But I guess...
Well, there's definitely more that can be done and more that will be done. There's a lot of talk right now, and there's a lot of controversy around it too, of code of conduct or anti-harassment. And there's definitely going too far with it to the point where people are self-censoring, actually self-censoring, as opposed to just being respectful, which is super important. But we have to think about how our words and behaviors do affect other people. And not that we are individually responsible for all of the sensitivities for every human on the planet. But, again, there's no clear lines. So we each, I think, can benefit from being introspective, seeing where we are and coming up with our own decisions on what's okay and what isn't. But having a code of conduct is something we did at Hope Conference 2 years ago, Hope X. And it was really difficult to come up with that. Really difficult. And this is a whole group of people that already knew that we wanted to have a community of mutual respect. And it was still pushing a lot of buttons. Yeah. We all have different sensitivities and insecurities and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it was really difficult, but I'm really proud of the code of conduct that we did come up with. And we decided to keep it positive, much like, I co-founded Noisebridge, like I said, and we have one and only one rule, and we wanted it to be a positive rule and not a negative one. Our one rule is not, don't be a dick. That's super different than our one rule, which is positive, which is be excellent to each other. So we wanted it to be a code of conduct that said, what we want positive, not what we don't want negative. Yeah. So, I think we did a pretty good job of that, but we can always improve. And so this time, Hope, the 11th Hope, just was in New York City a couple weeks ago. And we had a bunch of volunteers who were around who could be contacted in case anyone felt like they had been, like some people were acting in ways that weren't mutually respectful. But we had very few people bring that up. And hopefully that means, we don't know because some people may not have brought anything up, but hopefully that means there was a lot less of that because we were making it an issue that really think about what you say and how you say it, and what your behavior is and how it affects others, and just keep mutual respect in mind.
I mean, these conversations should never end. But for this one, for today, one thing I wanted to ask you about is we've talked about your work and workshops, and they're going to continue. Your agenda is full on, at least for the next 6 months. Yeah. And so for those listening, you have to imagine, Mitch very rarely, as he said, has time at home and is always on the road. And I'm not just talking about Europe and North America. We're talking about China. We're talking about India recently. Brazil is on your agenda, which is something fantastic to even just to hear about, to travel vicariously with you. And that it's a great thing. There is something else that interests me, and I don't know if there's any answers, but it's fun to hear you think about it. So TV Be Gone, which you've talked about how millions. How many have you said?
500,000.
500,000.
Yeah, a little over.
You made a decision regarding that, and I'm gonna just talk about it a little bit because I'm curious. I didn't even hear all the details about what led you to that decision.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. So, for the last 12 years, it's been the center of my life, really. And I've had a lot of things that are really important in my life, but that's still a huge part of me. I make a living on a project that no one in their right mind would have ever started a business around, a keychain that turns TVs off in public places. But one of the things I love about the whole hacker scene is I've met so many people that have started businesses on things that an MBA from Stanford would tell you that's totally stupid. Don't do it.
Won't work.
Yeah. So, but we can try stuff and see what happens. That's hacking, And hacking, again, to stress this, what you touched on earlier, is not breaking into computers and stealing stuff. That's criminal activity. Hacking is a mindset. It's a way of life. And it started from MIT before computers were a thing. Computers were for people with white button-down shirts and thin ties. And so it's about anything. It's a way of life. It's a way of looking at things, a way of living, looking at the world full of resources, and you can use them any way you want. To enhance your projects. Your project can be a technology thing. It can be art, science. It can be craft. It can be music. It can be yourself. It can be your community. It can be the planet. And we should hack the planet. Everything can be made better. And hacking is a way to do that. And if we share it, that really is hacking. And we do it because we love it. And TV Be Gone was an outgrowth of that kind of thinking, although I didn't call it hacking at the time. Yeah. But I quickly learned it because shortly thereafter I went to my first hacker conference. And it's the way I've made a living for the last 12 years. The first year was half of the sales, about $250,000, because I was on pretty much every TV station on the planet, which is ironic for a keychain that turns TVs off, and on radio shows and newspapers and on and on and on and on. It just kept going on, and that's advertising you can't pay for. But and then for every year thereafter, it was just steady, and it was enough to pay the 12 people who helped me and me to do what I do. But last year, the sales went by half. And I don't know why, because I wasn't doing anything differently. And it's not like there are any less TVs in the world. There are way more now in public places than ever. And they need to be off, and they're on. And if we don't turn them off, who will? But
good slogan.
So I don't know why, but I knew that I couldn't afford to keep doing that. I would have been fine if it was just breaking even. Right. Because it's pretty much runs itself by now. I just put money in a bank account, and then pallets of TV Be Gone appear, and then they go to my fulfillment center. People order them online, wholesale happens, whatever. It was all kind of automated. But I decided I wouldn't make any more. Right. And but then several people, including one of my older customers, said that they would like to continue to make TV Be Gone. And so there'll probably be some on their website within a couple of months. And they're even going to make TV Be Gone Pro, which became too expensive to manufacture in China, where I manufacture, by the way, using a place that treats their people well and pays them well, and the environment, as well as giving me a good enough price and high quality. So, so they're using the same manufacturer. Yeah. And so it'll still be available, and I'm glad for that. And the kits will still be available as well. They've never slowed down.
Is it going too far to say this is a new chapter in your life?
Yeah, because I don't really know what's next for me. I have a little bit of a buffer that I'm living off of now. I get paid more now. Like before, I've been giving talks and workshops since 2007, and sometimes I'd get a little bit of money from giving talks, like a speaker's fee. Yeah. But over the last 3 years or so, I've been getting paid more for that, and so that's been helping me go, and it pays for all my travel And while I'm traveling, I can give workshops at places that can't afford to pay me, like at hackerspaces all over the world and community centers at schools, whatever, libraries, museums. And so maybe that'll grow. I don't know. All I know is that like in 2003, when I quit working at the consulting jobs that I just kind of liked to make room for exploring what it is I might love and hopefully make a living from it, and it worked out well. I was lucky enough that it did. I'll keep exploring and doing what I love, which is what I've been doing ever since 2003, and see what happens. And I have no idea what it'll be or what it all might add up, how all the things that might add up to how I'll make a living, but I'm not worried about it. I just know somehow it'll work.
The goal is what it was. I mean, the goal is the same, I see.
Yeah, the world is full of resources and we can make use of them.
On that note, Mitch, it's great to have you in my home.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
And it's good that we've had time to enjoy tea and fruit and food and conversation.
Time.
Yeah, and we'll catch up with you really soon.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
You've been listening to a conversation with Mitch Altman. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're interested in his work, I recommend, first of all, the website cornfieldelectronics.com. There you can see, for example, the last TV Begons that are still for sale, or the kits. I think that's also available. You can follow Mitch. He's at Maltman23, M-A-L-T Man23 on Twitter. And generally, I hope that you're lucky enough to meet him at a conference near you really soon. Lastly today, this is an appeal, actually, to you, the listeners. Over the years on this podcast, or on Citizen Reporter, I should say, if I say over the years, one voice above all others that has been on from Japan on many issues related to Japan is that of Matthew Karamoon, perhaps best known as just Karamoon. Unfortunately, Karamoon is battling stage 4 cancer, and in Japan, health coverage only goes so far, and it won't cover immune therapy, which is something he very much wants to pursue, not just for his sake, but for the sake of his young family. And so it costs extra, and what we're doing, we've got a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for Matthew's battle with cancer. He's following not just this podcast, but a lot of interactions as best he can while he's undergoing various procedures. And so I want to do my part, not just by donating, but also by asking all of you, click on the link. It's in the show notes on realitiespodcast.com. Support Matthew however you can. I'm hoping that actually we can get him on in person to talk about his experience. It's not an easy one, and of course, podcasting is not always, well, it's not always the priority, rightfully so, so we'll see. But in the meantime, the GoFundMe campaign, please do click support. Okay, that pretty much wraps it up for today's program. Music on today's podcast was by Misha Mishenko, and in the background, you're hearing Minor Sailor, both wonderful musicians who've agreed to allow me to use their music on this podcast. So please do look them up. I'll provide a link on the website, realitiespodcast.com. I'll be back real soon with a reality check and an update on some of the things we've discussed here. In the meantime, I hope not only that you're listening, that's nice, but also that you subscribe to podcasts. That way, it's not I'm just listening to this one. Oh, I didn't hear the next one. I didn't know there was a next one. You don't have to worry. You can subscribe. All right. Thanks so much for listening. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye. Goodbye.
What a lot of people are not doing is simply looking at society, looking at the people, seeing how the people react, seeing how they talk to each other, how they talk to outsiders, looking for the small things, the things that somebody with a hacker mind might look for, as opposed to somebody that just is fed on mainstream TV.